if you look at your shareholders like their clients, like what would my client need to make a decision on such case as a lawyer? Like for me at my law firm, the way I've always trained our attorneys is you give them all the news you can get and you tell them about it and you just bombard them with information, and then you distill it down to what you think's the most important. You identify the risks and the possible upsides and downsides. You try to communicate how big those risks are. I know that's difficult for public markets because we also have folks are also very worried about making any statements of certainty, right? So everything's a risk in the public markets, and it's sort of buyer beware on an investor side to figure out the risk, the value of the risk for themselves. But at least the risk needs to be identified, and as much information as possible needs to be thrown out there for the investors to do their due diligence on their own time. For instance, as you mentioned before, and we've talked about walking into the Born Defense deal, like the more information you put out there in terms of interviews about deal flow for like an investment issuer like Born Defense, or about the participants in the deal, the players on the management team, just having information so these shareholders, these potential investors can look folks, quote unquote, in the eye the best they can on video and just decide, do I trust these guys or, forget about them. I'm going to move on. And I pass the smell test. I don't feel good about them. But they at least should have that opportunity, right? Like for better or for worse, just get information out there and let people make the decisions for themselves beyond just a bunch of paper and a listing statement.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. And I think it's really important to understand that many investors are just coming in because they want to see a multiplication on their investment. And you have to understand that there are those two types of investors. There's an investor that really believes in the company and vision, and they're probably going to ride it out, whatever happens within reason. But then there's also the investor that sees what we just talked about, the timing, the team, access to capital, news flow. They think they're going to make, 3x, whatever their goal is, and they're going to be in and out. And that's a good thing. We want that sort of activity in the market and want to be able to supply wins for those types of people and traders. And too often people focus very heavily on the ride or die investors that will go to 1 cent, whatever with them. So I think it is important to understand, again, that there is a bit of a negative skew, I would say, from the company side on day traders and volume and investors coming in and out. But that's part of what makes a good stock, what makes an interesting story. And you'll have lots of content online and people talking about you on the various forums is appealing to both those groups. But the nice thing is both of those groups want to see approximately the same thing. Is really comes down to communication.
Yeah, and I think on the day trader side, which I think people often unfairly classify them as gamblers, and they focus more on the long-term holders, but they are very valuable because they add liquidity to the market. Without liquidity, what's the point of going public? Like, what's the point of having shares that you can capitalize and you can sell pieces of your company to if folks, when they buy in, they can't sell because a market needs buyers and sellers. Like we love holders, we love long-term relationships with people. They're very valuable and they're teammates, but the buyers and sellers are teammates too. Like you need sellers in order to have buyers, right? You need to have the ask and the bid get close to each other so a deal can be made and stock can trade. So is there a different messaging you do to these folks, or is just transparency the key regardless?
I think transparency is the key, but also it's important to understand too, further to your point, that my understanding of the institutional side, which I'll admit is a lot lighter than the retail market, but my understanding is that institutional investor and taking that deal or that company to the next level, it requires volume in the market. So again, it's not even that it's good to have or that, we've talked about reasons why it's beneficial, but it's almost crucial to get to that next step. And I think in terms of the marketing, again, you need to really hammer on the timing. The people that are in the story for the long run, they're going to resonate with your story and your brand. They're going to want to see letter from the CEO or video interview with the CEO and communications and new websites and decks. That trader, that person that sees an opportunity and is going to jump on it, it's probably going to be catalyst driven with news. And that comes back to at least the Canadian markets right now, as well as the US and global markets. It's been a bit rocky in the small cap world for some time now, but the last few months started to really be red hot, even in the small cap sectors. So again, you're kind of getting this perfect alchemy of team, funding, timing, and project news flow, where I think it's really a great opportunity for companies, including Born Defense, but other issuers, to take advantage of right now and get their story out to the market.